Welcome back to the studio. We're moving pretty quickly through the Hummingbird Garden block of the month or whole quilt kit, and I believe we're on block number 5 today. So I'm going to go ahead. I've already pre-ironed the block that I pre-cut. I always like to make sure that those are nice and crisp with no little pleats in it before I start fusing any applique shapes to it. And then in the center of my package here, I'm going to pull out my paper pattern. These patterns are all actual size. They don't need to be enlarged. And I always retain my paper because if I ever wanted to utilize this pattern again and cut my own fabric, then I've got my whole pattern here with me. Otherwise, it makes a great placement guide for placing all of the components of the applique on the background. I just use my dry iron over the paper to get rid of those creases. And then I have my applique paper ready to go. I can lay my background fabric right on top of the pattern, and that's a pretty good way of making sure that my fabric is the correct size, because the cut size of the block is the size of the printed paper pattern for that block. So now I can go ahead and pull out all of my components. In this particular month, none of the pieces are for overlapping onto another block, so I can pull all the pieces out and get them in position for fusing. Now you could take your color sheet out and place it to the side, but I have this little acrylic stand and I always just pop it in the front, and I can look at that as my reference as I go. So I'll go ahead and pull the camera in and let you see how I get these pieces into place before I start fusing. On the pattern, you can see sometimes a pattern piece has dotted lines. The dotted line just indicates that that part of the pattern piece is behind another piece. So I could really start anywhere, but sometimes I'm tempted to start with the largest pieces, but I'm going to figure this out quick, and keeping it level, take it off to the side. I know there's another squiggly here. There it is. Get this squiggle figured out. Once I figure it out, I'll pull it horizontal off to the side, and now I can go ahead and start doing my hibiscus. All of these pieces are laser cut and pre-fused with the Steam-A-Seam 2. You can see the Steam-A-Seam 2 is that sticky part on the back of the fabric. Having all of this pre-done for you is kind of what is the expensive part of this. You're buying all of the fabric in beautiful colors, high quality fabric. It's already pre-fused for you with the Steam-A-Seam 2, so you don't have to buy that. And then it's a laser cut out, so it's exactly precise to the pattern. And I always think the laser cutting also gives you really, really incredibly crisp edges. I think that's why it holds up so well even under the washing without top stitching over all the pieces. Now if you were going to top stitch, I would use a really sharp needle, but we don't top stitch our samples. If you fuse this properly, it's completely permanent, and If you wash and dry it multiple times, you're going to get a little bit of a soft edge where that edges of the applique might fray or frizz a little bit. But if you top stitch all those edges, all of the perforations from the needle is going to fray or soften that edge. So regardless of whether you top stitch or not, the outcome is going to be similar in that you're going to have a little bit of a soft edge after washing. Let's see. I think I have my paper sideways, and that's why it was confusing me on which flower shape goes where. Trying to look at the pattern upside down was getting me confused. It's one of the fun things about doing the videos. You think you're really good at something, but until you try and do it and talk and record and be the lighting and the sound and all of the other components, and you start making mistakes that you wouldn't normally make if you were by yourself in a room, because your attention is divided over 10 different things. I think I've noticed over time that I look for the largest pieces of the puzzle first and get those into place, and then I just keep working down until I get smaller and smaller and smaller, until I have the smallest pieces done. All of these pieces are still repositionable, so if I needed to pick one up and move it, I could. But if somebody walked in and the wind blew through the door, it's not going to lift the pieces up because they're already sticking in place just from the steam seam tackiness. If you need to lift up a piece to get it layered in the proper order, it's easy to do. And the curve of the tail on the leaves and flourishes help you to realize where those go. I always see that these are the ones that I usually get are packed by Vicky, and I can't imagine what it must be like to package all of these pieces. I don't know how you keep it in order. Pretty sure I want that to come out of the center of that. So if it's off a little up here, I'd rather have that and have it make sense in the middle. So now we're getting down to just the last few leaves. I don't know if I've mentioned it in the past couple months, but this will be the last block to do for the body of the quilt. After we get these blocks put together, then I can do some of the applique components that I've been putting aside because the blocks overlap. And I think we'll be able to take care of that pretty quickly. Then we can put on our inner borders and our outer borders, and then finish with blocks 6 and 7. This particular quilt only has the 7 blocks, so as you see, it goes together pretty quickly. I think it would be a really nice wedding gift or a new home gift for somebody because it has the beautiful birdhouse. It's kind of like a nice welcome home sign. And we've done this in real time. And just that fast, we have all of our pieces in place. I could put this up on the design wall and make sure that I like the placement of everything. But once I'm ready, then I can go ahead and grab my Teflon pressing sheet and get this ready to be fused. Now I like to use the moisture, the spritz from a bottle, and I will just spray the top of the components with the just water, and then I can go ahead and place my Teflon pressing sheet on top and then set my iron down and let that go ahead and fuse in place. Steam Seam 2 does require a moisture component. I always keep the water in a spray bottle, that way I don't have to worry about my iron sputtering or leaking. And I use the Teflon pressing sheet to protect every step of the process. The pressing sheet protects the background fabric from getting scorched if I were to overfuse a place too long. Now you can't really overfuse the Steam Seam 2, but you could scorch your fabric. So the Teflon pressing sheet is a protective layer for that. The Teflon pressing sheet prevents any of the Steam Seam 2 from coming out from the edges of the applique and getting onto your sole plate. And then in preventing that, it also prevents that scorched glue from getting stuck back to your background fabric. And it also prevents the edge of the iron from crinkling up the edge of the applique and then fusing it in place. So if I were to not lift up carefully enough and catch the edge of my applique, it's not going to get all meshed up. If you're getting a lot of gumming on your needle when you're quilting, or if you are top stitching your blocks, all that gumminess on the needle is an indicator to you that you have not fused properly during this step. If you fused properly at this phase, there isn't a lot of residual glue that's free to get pulled back out of the project and onto your needle. Also, you have to remember on these compound pieces like the hibiscus that had 4 pieces plus the background, that heat has to have time to travel through all of the layers and the steam to be able to activate that fusible product and adhere it to the background and to each other. But once I've taken the time to fuse all of these different pieces, I will flip it over, re-moisten it, and then I'll go ahead and iron this again from the back, and that way I'm completely sure that we've gotten a really good bond between all of the layers. And I can even hear the sizzle of that steam. I almost have to distract myself at this phase because I try and rush through it, and you really need to calm down and let the iron do its work. If I was in a perfect world and I was doing this alone, I'd have the music on and I would be singing to myself in the studio. But I cannot have the music on while I'm recording. There you have it. Beautifully crisp, beautifully clear. Love the shapes, the colors, so vibrant on this butter yellow background. Really, really happy with that fabric choice. There you have it. We have block number 5 done on the Hummingbird Garden block of the month. The next time you join us, we will be assembling all of the blocks that we have finished so far. That is 5 blocks. Then we will add all of the overlapping applique to fill in the blank spots that there will be on that part of the quilt. After those are finished, we could put on the inner border, which I have not cut. In fact, I haven't even selected that yet. I'm going to choose my inner border, but I have chosen an outer border, which is just a slightly darker yellow from the background. Once we get that outer border on, we will add block 6 and 7. The fabric that I chose is, I'm going to be cutting on the length of grain because I bought a long enough piece of the solid yellow. In the instructions, they were cutting it with the fabric, so there'll just be a slight difference in the way we finish that off, but it will have less seams in it. So thanks for joining us again for block number 5. This is Hummingbird Garden. It's available on the Urban Elementz website, and we want to thank you for coming in, joining us, and we'll see you again next time.